Hey Guildies, Fletch here. Today I'm going to talk a little bit about the separation of deployment from release and what that means and why making your deployment and release the same thing is a bad idea. So in this example, I'm going to go over one of the controllers that we ended with in one of our previous examples. And in that example, I was calling this method for this API endpoint. I was calling this method which returns a monad, maybe of type string. And since Web API doesn't know how to work with my maybe monad, let alone any monad, it's not going to automatically unpack the monad, and it's not going to try to change the HTTP status code based on whether or not the monad binds to some or binds to none. So whether or not it has a value, it's not going to change the HTTP status code. So whenever I return this, you can see in my get something, can I zoom this in? Can't change Postman, I don't think. But I've got my get something endpoint here, same get something endpoint as up here. And if I hit send, then it calls that API endpoint. Now these are live in production on my local machine. These are deployed to IIS. I have two APIs. I have this API, and then I have an API that this depends on. So what happens whenever I call this get something endpoint is that it hits two different things. It hits its local, it's a mocked out database, and it also hits that other API. Those are two different dependencies external to the code here. And when it does that, it says, I got something from the DB, and I got something from DB2. DB2 just means it came from the other API, which hit its own DB. So the other API was hit DB2, this one hit DB number one, and it concatenated those messages. So that's where we left off last time. And I am going to, I want to make a change. I'm going to change this because I don't like this weird workaround where it returns, it uses a higher scoped variable, and then that higher scoped variable is set inside of this scope, and I don't like that. So I'm just going to say return it. There we go. Now I set up continuous deployment so that continuous integration and deployment so that I can say maybe commit all. The reason why this it's just a commit, but the reason it takes a minute is because, or a second, is because it's doing deployment. So come over here to my get something, and bam, it changed it. Now, what this is I released by deploying. And what that means is there were no other controls anywhere. I made some changes, and once it got deployed, it was released. One way that you can, pretty much the only way that you can negate any of the cons about this is to stop your continuous delivery pipeline in some sort of a staging or artifacts combination or gathering area. And what you'll do then is all these changes that you're making, tasks that you're completing or stories you're completing or work items, those just sort of pile up. And then at some point when you feel like you have all the things there in your artifacts or in your environment that you want, somebody, product owner or something like that, says, okay, we're going to release the current set of functionality. And then they hit the button. And that may just maybe swap DNSs from the staging environment to the production environment. It may be a blue-green deploy, or it may be something similar to that. The problem with that is you're having to build up a lot of different changes, possibly just from your story if you're doing multiple tasks and multiple commits from your tasks, and you're just getting to the end of your story. Maybe that's true. But more likely, it's your stuff and someone else's stuff, possibly changes in multiple services in your system, and all of them need to work together. And in order to make a feature work, more than likely, that's what's happening, is that you're building those things up. And then eventually, when in the staging environment, it looks like everything's working, then the product owner or something pushes the button or gives the okay, and then the DevOps or the platform engineering team, they push a button, and then it swaps the DNS or it deploys it live or something like that. That's really the only way that you can prevent any issues related to deployment is your release. So you can see here that previously it was just returning a string. And now that it's returning an object that has that string as a value, anyone that was using this is now broken. So if there were other APIs or UIs or something that were using this, those changes also have to happen, and they have to be all pushed at the same time. And that's what, to me, a surprising number of companies do. And if your company also does this, where they make multiple changes that rely on each other and they have to deploy them at the same time, I'm extremely sorry. And you need to possibly watch more of our videos and then be able to defend the idea of continuous integration and delivery and deployment, and the separation of deployment from release. So in this instance, deployment is the same as release, and all the things have to be deployed at the same time. This is completely avoidable, and it's a bad idea. Okay, this is a good idea. I actually do this on purpose in a lot of the systems I build, where I return the maybe monad in whole to some other system. But it's a bad idea to have your code or have your systems built, architected in such a way that when you are finished with a task, you're finished with something, it sort of holds up in a staging environment because it can't go to production, because we all know that when it goes to production, then it's in production and you can see it. That is a horrible mindset. That's not the way you need to do it. I'm going to keep this video short, and in the next video, I'm going to talk about some basic alternatives and then some more and more advanced alternatives on how to separate deployment from release so you can put stuff into production, but it's not yet affecting the people who are using that stuff. So I hope you liked this video. If you did, like and subscribe, ring the bell, leave a comment. I hope you're excited for the fix to this, which will come in the next video, and I'll see you guys next time.